Joining me as well to share our thoughts on the COP29 landmine deal is Professor Ayodele Morocco-Clarke, a professor of energy, climate, and environmental law at Nile University of Nigeria. Good to see you, Professor Morocco-Clarke. Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Well, Professor Clarke, the Baku finance goal of $300 billion over the next 5 years, I think, has been described by India as a scam, nothing worth the interests of the global south. The Nigerian team lead, Maduekwe, Nkiruka Maduekwe, says it's an insult and that it's unacceptable because it means nothing. And yet, what we have seen is a triple jump from $100 billion to $300 billion, and a projection that by 2035, the carbon credit range will hit about 1.5 trillion. Why do you think that the global south is saying that this shows lack of commitment on the part of the developed world?
The thing is, when people think of this climate financing, a lot of people laymen are of the view that maybe this is going to be funds that are going to come through to the least developed countries and those who are the most hit by the climate change issue. However, although before it was $100 billion dollars that was pledged, and it has been ramped up to $300 billion, this is still a little drop in the ocean of the financing that will be needed by vulnerable countries to mitigate and adapt to climate change. So a lot of countries, yes, India was a bit outraged, but the least developed countries are even much more outraged than India because they feel countries like India are getting a chunk of this $300 billion that has been pledged. And they feel that it shouldn't be so because they feel India is one of the emerging economies and should not be taken on the same level as the least developed countries in the world. So yesterday, that was Saturday, because the deal actually was concluded this morning. And yesterday, Nigeria was angry, our representatives to the COP29, and justifiably so, because the way it is, we have, I'm talking from the Nigerian perspective now, we have issues that we are dealing with. Climate change is affecting us. There are increased drought in the north of Nigeria, northern regions. People are being displaced, famine, starvation. Food security is a problem. It's a problem for a lot of these least developed countries, but Nigeria also facing it. In states like my home state, Lagos State, you have increased flooding, rising seawater levels. So this $300 billion may sound like a big deal, and even Amnesty International has said that this shows that the human rights of people are not really being addressed, because you are going to have, with this climate change issue, a lot of people that are going to lose their homes. They have to be displaced, and they have to look for other alternative places to live. And these kind of fundings, though sounding huge on paper, is minuscule compared to the requirements and the needs of a lot of countries, especially those in Africa and the least developed countries and the small islands that are being the ones at the front line of being hit by this climate crisis. So yes, we have that issue, and we have issues where a lot of countries wanted countries like China to also take an aggressive financing role in ensuring that funds are released, because the way things are working is under what we call normally in international law the common but differentiated responsibilities principle, wherein we know that all countries, everybody, all of mankind has a role to play and is responsible for the environment, the protection of the environment. But we know that some countries have much more resources than others. So these countries, they have the resources, finances, the technology, and all. And they are expected to take more a higher role, a more leadership style role than those countries that are the developing countries or the least developed countries. And so this, of course, causes concern because this is not the kind of financing we expected, and
Professor
most
Clarke.
countries, especially those vulnerable countries that expected.
Okay.
Yes.
Professor Clarke. Now, we've heard of COP26,
Yes.
COP27, COP28, COP29. At every climate change conference by state parties, we keep having these promises either from governments or from the private sector or from the financial sector. Should we still keep having this COP whatever, knowing that at the end of the day, people will be dissatisfied? In fact, the UN Secretary General this year says that the outcome is not ambitious enough. So why keep having this talking shop if nothing will happen?
It's easy to dismiss the achievements, the advancements. The thing is, when in this fight to reverse climate change, while we want to take giant leaps, even small steps are better than nothing at all. Yes, this year, a lot of countries, there's been a lot of criticism for Azerbaijan that, of course, hosted the COP29, and the role they played, of course, because they are 90% dependent on their own fossil fuels and all. They get 90% of their income from fossil fuels. But we all agree, and the issues here is, yes, I think it's necessary that we keep talking, because each year we make little, not as big as we want, little improvement, little steps ahead, which is better than nothing at all. Because climate change is, of course, an existential threat to mankind, and it's important that we deal with things firmly. However, we are not dealing with it at the level of which we would want. But no action at all is definitely not an option. So right now, yes, a lot of people are saying, oh, COP26, COP27, but even this COP29, what is very important here is that now we have the climate, the financing that has kind of been agreed. Not satisfactory. A lot of countries, some countries walked out. If you remember, the COP29 is supposed to have ended on the 22nd, and the negotiations still went on till this morning. So it's important that everybody understands that, yes, we are not happy with what is going on, but at least we are making progress a little step at a time.
Okay, but let me ask you about the responsibility of these same state parties that are complaining. Take Nigeria, for example. I spoke with Ovieteme George earlier on. Ovieteme George is our correspondent who was on the ground in Baku, Azerbaijan. And he was talking about pollution, gas flaring in the Niger Delta, in the South. Now, these same state parties that are complaining in the global South, how much responsibility are they putting, particularly with regard to energy transition? We can talk about, duplicitousness on the part of the global North. How about the people that are complaining themselves?
Okay. The thing is, we can approach this from a number of ways. When it comes to this climate crisis, we all know it's agreed that Africa has contributed about 3% or 4% to global warming as we know it. Now, that doesn't mean that we should not be responsible. A lot of my work has been done within the Niger Delta, and the pollution and gas flaring and the effects it has on the environment, on people, on health, human rights and things like that. Now, here in Nigeria, unfortunately, we suffer from what is well known as weak political will. So, although we have, gas flaring has been outlawed in Nigeria since 1984. I always scream this from the rooftops. But there are provisions for companies to continue to flare gas, and they have taken advantage of this. Upon getting the special ministerial dispensation and all, they've taken advantage of this, and they pay a penalty, which is really, again, very, very little compared to the effects of the gas flaring and the gas that is being used. Now, we have started to utilize some of the gas, but gas flaring still continues up till today. And even under the Petroleum Industry Act of 2021, again, gas flaring is supposed to have stopped, but it's still allowed under some circumstances. So the companies have taken advantage of this. And many of these multinational companies, if you look at them, you find out that they adopt a different standard in developing countries like Nigeria compared to their home countries. So like what Shell used to do, they don't get away with that in Netherlands or even Exxon in the US and things like that. But here in Nigeria, due to weak political will, weak enforcement and regulation of the oil industry, this continues. So yes, when we are talking of this, we are talking of, yes, the developed countries should take the lead, financing, technology, and things like that. But we have to look inwards as well. We need strong political will to make sure that we meet our obligations. And of course, issues of transparency and accountability are very important. You have to make sure that funds that are received, because not all the funds, you're not going to hand you the funds on the platter. Some of them will come in form of grants, some of them will come in forms of low interest loans, and some of them you expect private, a lot of this thing, because it's 1.3 by 2035, $1.3 trillion expected by 2035, but 300 billion by that same 2035. But that is the one that is going to be the ones that are funds in forms of grants and low interest loans and stuff like that. The other funds are expected from private, the private sector, investment and incentives and tax on reducing and eliminating fossil fuels. So we have to always hold ourselves accountable. Nigeria cannot afford to be complacent. Now, the president has done a good thing. He appointed Dr. Nkiruka Maduekwe as the DG of the National Council on Climate Change. She, of course, is her background is in climate change, so she knows what she's doing. And she hit the ground running. So that is a good thing. Now, what we need is to ensure that the right people are put in charge of the right things that will ensure that we meet our nationally determined contributions. Because under our contribution, we're supposed to reduce our emission unconditionally by 20% by 2030, and with assistance and financing by 47% by 2030, and to hit net zero by 2060. So within Nigeria, we have to take a situation in which we are going to start carbon taxes, of course, the carbon trade and market, and other systems to ensure that we can reach our obligations as we have set out under our nationally determined contributions.
Yeah, Professor Clarke, before
Yes.
we wrap it all up, I would like to ask you, now the Nigerian government is always talking about clean energy, even compressed
Yes.
natural gas, you know, these conversion keys that the Tinubu administration says is, you know, investing in. But you used the phrase, weak political will. Do you think, and I'm trying to vary the question, that the Tinubu administration is committed to this energy transition that some people tell us in the literature will take up to 50 years? But can the world wait till 50 years? And how committed, in your own assessment, is the Nigerian government, beyond appointing, you know, Mrs. Maduekwe as head of the climate change team?
The thing is, well, I can only speak from what I see. I don't know what's in the government's mind. Unfortunately, things are still moving at a very slow pace. Now, the National Council on Climate Change has taken the lead, but when it comes to other aspects, because we look at it, we have the Climate Change Act of 2021. Now, of course, we also have the carbon market that I believe this year the Vice President had launched a program regarding that. So we have carbon credits and stuff like that. But this CNG, you know, gas is a transitional fuel. And that was declared by President Buhari, ex-President Buhari, as transitional fuel from 2020 to 2030. So to meet our obligations there, it's not going to be like an end to everything. So CNG is better than using petrol, but that is not the goal. So it's transitional. So all this CNG thing is just like temporary, you know, putting a stopgap in place. That is not where we should go. We are supposed to go fully electric. You have some people having hybrid vehicles and stuff. But even when it comes to energy consumption, many of us rely on generator. The various discos that provide electricity, many people do not have uninterrupted power supply. So we have ways that we go. People use diesel for their gens, they use petrol for their gen. And if you look at the Nigerian government, I am not sure it is as committed as it should be. Like years ago, Senator Ben Murray Bruce tried to introduce a bill to phase out fossil fuel cars and bring in electric vehicles. And I remember then, I think it was Deputy Senate President Ekweremadu, who had said, oh, Nigeria is an oil-producing country, we should ban electric cars here. And I thought that was a reckless, irresponsible statement by somebody who is a lawyer and should have known better. And the bill, of course, did not make it through. So things like that, we have issues that we need to address. And I believe the government has its heart in the right place, but I don't think it still has the strong political will that it should have to tackle this issue and to deal with it. And Nigeria, a lot of Nigerians like to feel Nigeria is the giant of Africa, but if we are to be the giant of Africa, we should take our place and lead from the front.
On that note, I would like to thank you very much, Professor Ayodele Morocco-Clarke, for joining me on This Is Live, the Sunday talk show today.